In this video, we're looking at column addition. In order to be able to do this successfully, you need to have a good understanding of place value and be able to add single digits confidently in your head. If we look at the first example, 42 plus 36, we can see straight away that this is a difficult sum to do in our head, and that's when we know that we need to write it down. When we write down in column form, we need to write down both our numbers one above the other, and we need to make sure that our units, tens, hundreds, thousands, etc. line up vertically. In order to do this, we need to identify the units in our numbers, in this case 6 units in 36 and 2 units in 42, and we need to check that they are lining up one above the other in our units column. If we've done that successfully, everything else should follow. So as we can see here, 4 tens and 3 tens line up nicely in our tens column. When we're using column addition, we start on the right hand side, in this case with the units column, and we work backwards right to left. Before I begin my sum, I'm actually going to make an estimate so that if I get an answer close to my estimate, I know that my answer is probably right. If I look at my numbers, they're both close to 40. 42 is 2 away from 40, and 36 is 4 away from 40. 40 and 40 is 80, so I should expect an answer that's close to 80. I can now start my sum. As I say, I start on the right hand side by adding my units. 2 units and 6 units is 8 units, and I write my answer below. I can then move on to my tens column. 4 tens and 3 tens is 7 tens. Write my answer below in my tens column. And as I can see, my final answer, 78, is very close to my estimate of 80. So I'm quite confident that I've got the sum right. If we look at our second example, sometimes things aren't quite so straightforward. I'm going to follow exactly the same routine as I did with the first example. I'm going to start on the right hand side, adding my units, and then moving across into my tens, remembering that I need to estimate beforehand. This time, 47 is close to 50. I know from my number bonds that 50 and 25 is 75, so I'm going to expect my answer to be quite close to 75. Beginning my adding in my units column, 7 units and 5 units is 12 units. This is where I reach a problem. I can't write 12 units in the units column. What I need to do is I need to remember that 12 units is actually 1 10 and 2 units. I can then write my 2 units in the units column and my 1 10 in the tens column. I don't write it here because I still need to add some tens, and I need to leave that space. So I write it below the line. I can then move on to adding my tens. 4 tens and 2 tens is 6 tens, and not forgetting the 1 10 that I've put below. That's 7 tens. My answer 72, again, is very close to my estimate of 75. So I'm confident that my answer is correct. If we look at the third example, if I do my estimate straight away, I can see that my answer is probably going to run into the hundreds. Here, 96 is very close to 100 already, and then I'm going to add on 38, which is close to 40. So I'm going to expect my answer to be somewhere around 140. Therefore, I will need to use my hundreds column here. Once again, starting on the right hand side, my units column, I'm going to add my units. 6 units and 8 units is 14 units. Remembering that 14 units is 1 10 and 4 units, I'm going to put my 4 units in the units column and my 1 10 underneath the line in my tens column. Move on to my tens column. 9 tens and 3 tens is 12 tens. Not forgetting the one underneath is 13 tens. Now 13 tens is 103 tens. So I can write my 3 tens in my tens column and my 100 in my hundreds column. I can see the 13 there. This time I don't need to write the 1 underneath the line because I have no more hundreds to add. Looking at the fourth example, you can see that once you've got the hang of this, the pattern remains exactly the same for numbers with however many digits you want to add together. In this case, 3-digit numbers. All I need to remember is I start on the right hand side and work my way right to left. Adding my units, 6 units and 7 units is 13 units. Remembering that that is 3 units and 1 10. Moving on to my tens column. 4 tens and 7 tens is 11 tens. Not forgetting my 1 10 there, which is 12 tens, 12 tens, 2 tens and 100. And then finally I can move on to my hundreds column. 3 hundreds and 2 hundreds is 5 hundreds, not forgetting the one there, 6 hundreds. I forgot to do my estimate that time, but if I can quickly look back and check, I can see that 346 is close to 350, 277 is close to 300, so a rough estimate, I would say my answer should be somewhere around 650. I think it's close enough to be confident that my answer is correct. When it comes to adding decimals, we use exactly the same method as we've done previously. When it comes to adding decimals, we follow exactly the same process. If we look at the next example, we can see we have 2.46 plus 3.92. Again, we need to line up our units. We've got something else here that helps us to check that our numbers are lining up in the correct place value. That is our decimal point. I'm going to highlight the units in each of these numbers, and we can see that they go in the units column. This time the units column is not the one on the right hand side. Here we've got tenths and hundredths as well. So I line up my numbers using my units column and checking that my decimal points are one above the other as well. And I'm going to, before I even start my calculation, put another decimal point in my answer space. It's very important that you do that in order to get the correct answer. Okay, once again, I'm going to start on the right hand side. So in this case, in the hundredths column, and I'm going to add my hundreds. So I've got 6 hundredths and 2 hundredths. That gives me 8 100ths. Moving on to my tenths column, I've got 4 tenths and 9 tenths, and that's 13 tenths. 13 tenths is 3 tenths and 1 unit. And then I can move on to my units column. 2 units and 3 units is 5 units, and 1 unit is 6 units. There I can see my answer is 6.38. Sometimes you will be faced with dealing with numbers that don't have the same number of decimal places. This is still straightforward to deal with as long as you remember to line up your units and your decimal places. As you can see in the next example, I have 3.6 plus 4.62. 3.6 only has 1 digit after the decimal point. 4.62 has 2. As long as I make sure that my units, which I'm going to identify with my orange pen, are lined up in my units column, my decimal points are all lined up, everything else should be okay. Once again, I'm going to put a decimal point in my answer space. And one thing you can do is put a 0 in any spaces that are left over to make sure that your decimal numbers are all of equal length. Remember, a space just means there's nothing there, and a 0 also means nothing. And once again, going to start on the right hand side, in this case in the hundreds column, and I'm going to add my hundreds. 0 hundredths plus 2 hundredths, simply 2 hundredths. Moving on to my tenths column, I have 6 tenths and 6 tenths, which is 12 tenths. That's 2 tenths and 1 unit. Moving on to my units, 3 units and 4 units is 7 units, not forgetting the 1 underneath, that's 8 units.